Welcome to Say More from Boston Globe Opinion. I'm Shirley Leung. Happy Lunar New Year! It's my favorite time of the year for seeing family and eating so many dumplings. We're celebrating the Year of the Horse, and this year I wanted to ring in the new year with Janice Page. She's a former Globe features editor, and she just wrote a memoir. It starts with her big Catholic family in Braintree, Massachusetts, and ends in mainland China. The book is called The Year of the Water Horse. It's a love story about the love between children and parents and the love that crosses oceans. Welcome, Janice.
Thank you, Shirley. It's so great to be here.
Okay, so I first want to talk about Chinese New Year. Tis the season. 新年快乐.
Or 恭喜发财, whichever we like, right?
Yes, that's right. Very good. Your Chinese is pretty good. I listened to the audiobook. So.
It gets me in trouble, Shirley. I max out pretty quickly.
So let's talk about the Chinese zodiac. I grew up being a rat. I come from a family of rats. Like my
nice.
grandparents were rats, and my aunt is a rat. But my mom's like, oh, that really suits you well because I love to scrounge around and eat. I love to eat. So
it's one of the really interesting things is that the animals ascribed to the zodiac, the Chinese zodiac, are not all flattering to like Westerners, right?
That's
so
right.
They're like, do you really want to be a rat? But there's nothing wrong with being a rat in this context.
So what's your sign?
I'm an ox or a cow.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Strong, right?
Yes. Although then a lot depends on what time of day you're born. Because if you're born in the morning, then you're, kind of too hardworking, industrious, like too work oriented. But if you're born at night, you're a little more mellow.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, everything factors in, according to my husband, anyway.
So I want to get a little bit more into the zodiac business as it relates to your book. But first, I want to set the scene. So you are originally from Braintree. You're part of this big Catholic family. I'm trying to imagine Massachusetts back in the 60s and 70s.
Correct,
when you were growing up.
60s and 70s.
And it's probably not very diverse.
No, not that's an understatement. No, one black boy in my class of more than 700, my high school class, and I think I met the first Jewish person in my life when I was, a preteen.
Oh wow!
Everyone was not only white, but white and either Catholic or Protestant.
And your first real introduction to Chinese culture was working in a restaurant.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
So I answered a classified ad. Remember those? Back in the day in the newspaper, looking for waitresses. I had two waitressing jobs, but I was on my way to college and really needed the money to pay for it. So I thought I'd take on a third. And I show up. I make the call first and get a very shorthanded instruction to come with an indeterminate accent. And I show up and it is a Chinese restaurant. And I thought, well, that's that. I don't know really even why I'm here because I'm not going to get this job. But this person, Benny Wu was his name, and the restaurant was Mandarin Garden in East Braintree. And he wanted to have white waitresses. He thought that would be probably less intimidating to his
that's
clientele.
Really smart because most of the clientele are white.
Yes, all basically, or very much. So he thought that this would work, and I thought it was kind of intriguing, to be honest. And it was, again, another job. So I started. He said, "Come," and I came, and for a really long time, that whole first summer that I was there was no business really to speak of because he was this little hole in the wall that really nobody really thought of. He was the first Mandarin Szechuan Hunan restaurant on the South Shore.
Oh, wow.
There were some in Boston, but this was the first on the South Shore. So
most of the Chinese restaurants are like
they
Cantonese.
Walked in looking for poo-poo platters
Right.
and fries and white bread and wet naps, honestly, because that's what was there right before he got it.
Yeah.
And so we most of the time you spent most of the time just talking and playing battleship games and all that and just getting to know each other. And that's like the first time he was really the first Chinese person I talked to at any length.
Oh,
and
wow.
he started to tell me this extraordinary story about how his family had fled mainland China for Taiwan during the Civil War because his father was in Chiang Kai-shek's army.
Yeah. And as you write in your book, it's a very familiar story.
Very, like maybe one of the most familiar.
Right. I mean, my
Taiwan.
own family's the same way.
Right.
You know, my grandfather, my parents, both of them were born in mainland China. After the communists came in 1949, one family fled to Hong Kong, the other fled to Taiwan.
Yep.
My grandfather was actually a soldier in Chiang Kai-shek's, you know.
So, yeah, I mean,
Army.
you know. And it's extraordinary how many people you meet from who have some roots in Taiwan who have that story.
So what made you stay there? I mean, this is a foreign culture. I mean, the chefs would tease you, right?
Yeah, they would tease us. They would also like throw things at us when we didn't know
Make
much.
fun of your Chinese.
Yeah, make fun of our Chinese. You know, probably the through line for most journalists is curiosity, right? This was a world I had never seen. Maybe even in movies and on television, not this world, not the inside the kitchen of a Chinese restaurant. And it was that, plus it was funny, it was delightful, it was meeting people that I would never otherwise have met. And honestly, I took it as kind of like, let's see, as any good New Englander would have approached it. I thought, let's see if I can learn something here. Let's see if I can do this. And I started to learn really, really pidgin Mandarin, just enough to be able to order things. And it didn't matter if I was getting made fun of. It was kind of fun to be able to do that stuff. So it brought me far more than I was ever bringing to this job. I can tell you that. And honestly, by the end of the summer, I had gotten so much out of it from a cultural perspective. It was exactly the thing I needed to open my eyes and receptors just as I was going off to college. I didn't know I needed that at the time, but it absolutely helped.
So your husband, James, is from Taiwan, and you met him working. Was at this restaurant or a different restaurant?
So his sister worked at the restaurant that I worked at, and then the same owner opened another location in Stoughton, and he came to this country and started working there. And she introduced us.
And so there's this one line in the book, and you write, quote, "The way you see Chinatown when you're a Lao Wai outsider who only goes there for dim sum and cheap Christmas stocking stuffers is very different from how you see it when you're falling in love with a Chinese man and his culture." So how is it different?
Oh my God! I guess it's the same. It's like thinking New Orleans is Bourbon Street instead of what it really is, right? It's what you see. You start to notice what's behind all that, right? It's not the place where you're just shopping for a trinket or some food or going when the red firecracker paper is all over the street. You're now seeing that there's, oh my goodness, there's an insurance agent there. Who saw that? There's a tailor there. And in this case, there were places where one would go to be healed, with Eastern medicine, which, again, was something new to me. But so, you walk down this alley and you walk up a flight of stairs and all of a sudden you're in an office that doesn't look like any doctor's office I ever knew, but was strange and wonderful and helpful for me to understand both what was going on behind the scenes there and what the culture was of this person that I was now getting to know.
So what do you feel are the biggest differences when you first met James? I mean, biggest differences between your culture and James, like in the beginning?
In the beginning, the biggest difference was that he was so worldly and I was not.
Oh, he has fancy suits from Filene's basement,
correct.
right?
He would go to Filene's basement. He would look for Armani and Hugo Boss and Ungaro. I mean, it was crazy. I didn't even know, I didn't know any men who dressed like that. He would go looking for bargains and he would dress just impeccably.
I was struck by that. I was like, wow. But I guess in Taiwan, I mean, he didn't grow up in Taipei. He grew up outside.
He grew
but
up
it's very
in southern
stylish.
Taiwan.
I mean, it's a global city compared to Braintree, right?
And think about it. His influences were the ones he was seeing in movies and television and so forth. So he thought,
right.
I'm going to go someplace where this stuff is available.
So besides his worldliness, in terms of your introduction to Chinese culture, I mean, what else did you pick up from James?
A better question would be what I didn't. He's actually a better observer of things than I am, as in a more detailed. But as I said, when I talked about journalism and the curiosity factor. You know, you're always observing people. Strangely, I guess this is probably the thing that hit me most in the early going was how similar to me he was. He had a profound, pronounced work ethic. He had a really pronounced, I will call it feminine side. I used to call him the Chinese Phil Donahue. he just really cared about and knew women. You know what I mean? And I found out later it's because he was raised by, you know, his father died when he was quite young, and his mother raised them. And he had a real appreciation for strong women, which obviously that's going to, you know, be very important to me. And the way he saw the world was really both very much like me and just more open, more wide open, less myopic than I had been raised to be or than I was at that time. So he was both familiar and not. And the funny thing about our language barriers, which were profound at that point because he really knew very limited English, but it stripped down all of our communication. So I can have a tendency to hide behind words, right? I can have a tendency to talk too much and just like, you know, not edit myself. But I did edit myself with him, not in the way that I was censoring myself, but in the way that but in an economy of words type of way. And that really made us get to the point. And it was really quite astounding.
More of my conversation with Janice Page after this short break. So let's talk more about your adopted daughter, Zoe. She's from mainland China, and she was a little more than a year old when you went to China, mainland China, to pick her up. You wrote about this in the Globe magazine in, I think, 2004.
Right.
And one of my favorite parts of the book is you taking us behind the curtain to this adoption. And there's all these American families who are doing the same thing, right? And you gather at, I think, what's become a fairly famous hotel, right?
Yeah, the White Swan Hotel in Guangzhou.
Yeah. And so you're meeting, everyone's meeting their babies for the first time. So it must have been really surreal.
Yeah. So first we went to Nanchang, which was the major city that where we would meet her because she's from rural China, a place called Yiyang. And they brought all the babies there. And there's the scene in the book where it really is the most chaotic thing I've ever been a part of, right? There were more than 30 families in my adoption group. It was kind of the height of the adoption movement. And it really was just babies crying, you know, the nannies that had brought them there looking for the parents unaware of how to even identify their own kid because the Chinese names were so unfamiliar to them when they were yelled out, you know. So it really felt like a test.
Right.
And it was just so crazy. So that scene, as chaotic and everything else, emotional as it was also like, you know, the start of something that was never going to get less chaotic, honestly, because parenthood isn't. But almost within hours, we had Zoe back in our hotel room that first night, and she was, after a change and like, you know, feeding and all that, she was pretty happy.
Yeah,
and
but she was inconsolable for a long time,
and
right?
I thought, what mistake have we just made? But then it is amazing how resilient children are and how resilient you are. And I am not glossing over anything here. Adoption is clearly a very hard process, and I don't want to minimize any of that. But it is quite astounding how quickly the thing can turn.
So adopting this Chinese baby girl gave you an unexpected connection to James's mother, your mother-in-law.
Right. She had, during the Chinese Civil War, had to leave behind her only daughter at the time, her only child at the time. And it was a very dangerous road to where she was going. She was going to Shanghai, many hundreds of miles. And if they had been found out, discovered, it would have been very bad for both of them. So she left the child behind. There were other reasons. And she would have thought that they would be back to reunite quickly because, you know, the tables would turn, Mao would be overthrown. That didn't happen, as we know from history. And it was 40 years, some 40 years before they were reunited through, finding each other through again, oddly, a classified ad. And that was an extraordinary story, right? And I knew of that story, and I knew how arduous, I knew how traumatic that tale was, and yet how beautiful it was that they had reunited. When you know the origins of a baby abandoned, that baby might be an orphan if the parents are dead. But if you don't know the origins, you just know that the baby has no parents visible. That baby's a foundling. And a foundling, at one point I was actually going to call the book Foundlings, because we're kind of all foundlings in some way or another, right? We don't know every part of our histories.
So we have these two girls, but there's also parallels between you and your mother-in-law.
Right. So, once I realized that it is really interesting when you're writing a book how much you kind of discover the twinning or the loops, right? They are the most fantastic part of writing. And, one of the things I was realizing as I came to know my mother-in-law, James' mother, and her child, Tusho, was that she had raised a child and left that child behind, but that child became a foundling, right? And I was adopting a foundling. We don't know the origins of Zoe's mother. We can speculate that her parents, were left her behind because of the one-child policy. But the truth is, we don't know that. It could have been a teen pregnancy. Someone could have died. We just don't know. So the connections here are not just between these two babies, the foundlings, but they're between the mothers. They're between the families. They're between cultures. They're across oceans, as you said. And it made the whole thing fit together in a way that I didn't anticipate when I started. When I started this book, I actually thought I was telling the story, kind of twin pillars of this story, my mother-in-law's story and mine. And we would meet because of my love of James, and who's her son, and all that. I didn't expect to find so many layers under that of us connecting, of our stories actually being similar, distinct, sure, but similar. And the tragedies that are parts of both of our stories, those things, those losses and gains, are really at the heart of the book.
And by a turn of fate, these two girls were born 60 years apart, which means they're both born in the year of the water horse.
Right. And that was an extraordinary revelation of itself. I didn't know that going into this. I didn't discover it until pretty recently, actually, that, because the zodiac is 12 animals and there are 5 elements, that multiplies, that's 60. And every 60 years, that combination repeats. So oddly, this child, Tusho, was born in 1942, and Zoe, I thought, was born in 2003, which would have been 61 years. So it didn't occur to me. But in fact, the Lunar New Year makes her birth part of the 2002 year. So they are 60 years apart. And that may not, the importance of that may not be immediately recognizable to people who don't understand how much is determined by these kinds of things. It matters. The naming of the child matters. The birth matters. The signs matter. All of it matters.
So what does it mean to James, and maybe even your mother-in-law, that you had 2 Year of the Water Horses in your family?
He was also surprised. He hadn't done the math either, right? For James, he didn't know his older sister for a really long time. He only met her the one time that we were both able to go to China and see her. And then she died not that long after. She died a few years after. And I think the connection that this represented between his new child and his sister, long lost sister, was, something. He doesn't talk a lot about it, but I could feel the weight of it when we discovered it and discussed it.
So one of the most touching moments of the book is when you go back to China with your daughter and you actually check out the orphanage, right? Where she spent some time in. And in kind of doing this research and going back to the orphanage, there was a note in her file. Right?
Yeah. It was the note that had been pinned on her. We call it the red letter. It was on kind of New Year's red paper, it was probably carefully cut out from some larger piece of paper, expensive paper, not that easy to come by. And it just said the basic information: when she was born, time of day, what seemed like a rudimentary note.
And Zoe was upset by that, right?
She was. She, like any person would be, she thought, we're all kind of trained, right? In again, by pop culture, I suppose, to think, wouldn't you, if you were writing a note, wouldn't you say, this is my most important treasure, take care of her, I can't, I love her, but, something, would you not want to say something?
Right.
And thankfully, James just swooped in, because Zoe really didn't know even how to articulate that. She just said, why doesn't it say more? And he said, no, it says everything. And he proceeded to tell her that information, which really is the only thing they had to give her, and they had to give it anonymously, and they couldn't give away any details about themselves, because this is a crime to leave a child. And she benefits from this information by the very things that we've discussed, of being able to go to a fortune temple book, the same kind he consults all the time, and say, well, I'm a water horse, and this is my fortune for this year, and it matters.
I mean, in the book, there was just a beautiful moment, because you could tell that Zoe was crushed.
She really was. Yeah.
She could be scarred for life. I mean, her birth parents just gave her up and didn't really say much, or through her American eyes, right? And so James was able to be like, no,
right, no.
It may not look like much, but this was carefully thought out, what information you needed. I was trying to think about, like, I couldn't quite. I was thinking, like, it was almost like coordinates on a map, right?
It was. Or in my movie language, it was like somebody cracking the code. It's like they're sitting there in the with a what looks like a worthless piece of junk.
Yeah.
And maybe not worthless. That's too much for this letter. But something that's disappointing. You've come to the end of the movie. It's supposed to be spectacular, and what? Nope. But here he comes, like some Marvel superhero, and he says this, and it made everything better. We can't make a pass for Zoe, but this was pretty close.
Yeah. I mean, it was really a moment. He was providing cultural translation.
Absolutely.
Right?
And all I can say is, thank God I have a Chinese husband, because otherwise I wouldn't have known. I would have consoled her as best I could. And
she would still be crushed if not for that translation.
And let's face it, there are lots of things that we all need therapy for all through our lives. But this was a moment that she could have a couple of answers that I personally could not provide for her, and he did. And in that moment, I was really aware of both how important it is to bridge cultures, and how important it is to observe and respect cultures. Both things were true in that moment.
So to me, the book is about, it's a love story, right? In all the senses of the word. And it's about the love between you and James, and the love that forms across, the globe. And this adoption becomes a perfect metaphor about how love doesn't follow, boundaries of biology or country of origin. So what do you think? When you finish writing this book, what do you think the book is about?
Yeah, well, it's about a lot of what you just said. I think of it sort of like water. Water finds a path. And when it finds a path, it goes somewhere. It doesn't always go where you want it to go. And sometimes you have to try to stop it and divert it. But it goes somewhere. It will flow. And this, I could never have imagined when I answered a classified ad, in 1979, that I was about to alter my entire life. And there are many ways that wouldn't have been true. Like, it could have just been a summer job. It could have been a quick chance to learn a little Chinese. It wasn't that. And it wasn't that because of the things that came after it. So I'm not a big believer in fate. I don't believe we're just acting out a script and we don't have any power over that. But I do really believe in serendipity, and I do really believe in observing the doors that are open and choosing to go through some of them. And when you're in that next room, to look at the other doors that open and go through those. And there are probably, millions upon millions of ways your life could go or end. This is the way mine went. And it went because of these things. So, in a way, right, like now when people are, I don't know, seemingly so adverse to, when people seem to be interested in narrowing paths or narrowing their worldview, I would just encourage a little more openness to everything that's around you and all the people who are around you who could make your life so different than you ever imagined it could be.
Well, Janice, I loved your book. 新年快乐.
谢谢你.
So anyways, Happy New Year, Janice. Thank you for coming into the studio.
Thanks so much for having me, Shirley. It was really, really fun.
Say More is a production of the Boston Globe. Today's episode was produced by Anna Kussmer. Our editor is Jim Dow. Our engineer is Uzair Ahmed. If you like the show, please follow us and leave us a review. You can email us at saymore@globe.com. I'm Shirley Leung. Thanks for listening.